But before I do that, who you did Who's Here for the first time tonight, right? All right. Who came here because of Meetup.com? Who came here because of their WordPress dashboard? Cool. All right. Well, welcome. You're at Lumenfire if you haven't figured that out already. I'm the CTO here, which means that I get to, what do I do around here, Tim? Everything under the sun. Should say chief cook and bottle washer, right? My education? You want me to talk about my education? Okay. So I kind of came into this in a weird way. I wanted to be a Pixar animator. And so I came up here to go to school at a school that taught animation and multimedia. Turns out that they were doing some really fraudulent stuff with school aid, and the school got shut down. So the state shunted us to another school, and I finished with a degree in multimedia design, which meant that I learned director and authorware and how to build multimedia CD-ROMs. When's the last time you saw one of those? Probably about 1997, the year I graduated, and the entire industry imploded because of Flash. So I learned Flash, and I learned programming, and ended up building content management systems before there were content management systems everywhere, and ended up in WordPress, and then ended up here. So that's kind of how I ended up standing before you today. My interests. I'm married and have kids, so I don't know if I have those anymore. My interests include WordPress, computers, watching Netflix. Yeah, that's about it. I did just build I like building stuff with my kids or for my kids. I just built, we bought a mud kitchen off Craigslist. And I was like, you know what? That sink just isn't doing it. It was just, like a blank sink. And I was like, I can do better than that. So I bought a faucet, and I bought a 10-foot long hose, and I bought a 5-gallon bucket, and I put it 6 feet in the air, and they have running water in their mud kitchen now. And a soap dispenser. And soon they will have a drain that drains it off into the rocks by the house. So that's what I did last weekend. So yeah, I guess that's one of my interests. So, not a lot of in-between slides there, is there? So I want to talk about hosting a little bit tonight because I get the question a lot, whether it's on Quora or the WordPress mailing list or in person or pretty much everywhere I go. Everybody wants to know from me, what's the best WordPress host? And I've used a lot of hosts in my life, and I mean a lot. Like I can't even count how many web hosts I've used in my life. Most of them could host WordPress. And that's a challenging question to answer because the answer is, of course, it depends. So instead of answering it directly, I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit about the hosting ecosystem, and hopefully you'll come out of it with an understanding of what might be the best host for your site. And we're going to try and spin this into a blog post on our website to help others. So you know what? We're not going to talk about that quite yet. So in the beginning, there was Linux, and it was good. And it changed the hosting landscape forever because hosting used to be insanely expensive because you had to pay a Windows license and buy a really big box and run the scourge upon the earth that is IIS. Nobody runs IIS unless they have to run IIS. That's the Windows web server. It's not a fun thing to run. I spent the first decade of my life in the Microsoft side. So we spent ridiculous amounts of money to buy ridiculous servers to run Windows and IIS, and now I could set that up for like $30 a month on AWS, and it would be far more powerful today. And it was like thousands upon thousands of dollars and buying racks and building server rooms and just ridiculous, right? So the hosting landscape changed pretty dramatically when Linux came on the scene, and it won the hosting wars before it won the desktop wars, and it's slowly winning the desktop war. A lot of people don't realize Mac OS is based on Unix foundations. So if you have a Mac, you're running FreeBSD under the hood, technically, not true Linux. But then Microsoft has said, okay, we're going to let Linux in, and now you can run Linux natively on Windows machines. So in virtual machines. So it's like slowly creeping into every possible thing. Your iPhone runs FreeBSD. Your Android phone runs Linux. Your Chromecast runs Linux. Your Apple TV runs Linux. If you have an IoT device, it runs Linux. It's like everywhere in your life. And it runs pretty much every web server of any size on the internet. Yes, there's still Oracle and there's still some other ones out there, but pretty much if you're talking about hosting, you're talking about Linux. And so in the beginning, people would spin up big Linux boxes, and then they would, subdivide them like a subdivision and sell you a little slice, and that's called shared hosting. And that's where a lot of people start, right? That's the $5 a month at GoDaddy, or the $3.99 at HostGator, or the how cheap can they actually get before it's basically free kind of hosting approach. And, you're literally renting like a tiny sliver of a really big server somewhere, and that's how they make any money. It's because they've sold it to, in some cases, hundreds of people, this one server. Which means that you're in a very interesting neighborhood. It's not like a subdivision where there's a HOA. It's literally like you could be next door to a crack den or a meth house, right? So that's why shared hosting can be a little iffy, because you're on the same IP, which is like the same basic address. It's like, so imagine like you have a big house, but like there's literally a crack den in the living room, and you're in the dining room, and you're like, no, don't look at that, to Google, as Google kind of comes by to see your spot. So shared hosting is it's where a lot of people start. Anybody who's running a business, if you're running it on shared hosting, what are you doing? Like, you pay more for your phone bill, you pay more for a cup of coffee than your web hosting bill, you've got a problem. You're not really investing in one of the most important things in your business, which is a 24/7, 365, never takes a break, never takes vacation, doesn't require health care, doesn't go on disability, salesperson for your business. Why would you not pay them more than you pay for a cup of coffee? I don't get it. I've got people all the time like, why don't I just host at GoDaddy? Do you think you're getting much for $5 a month? You're not. And the thing with shared hosting is there's no money in it. So they can't really make money at $5 a month. You know how they make their money? Every time you call them for support, they try to upsell you something. Or they try to sell you 5 years of hosting and hope you're not going to use it. Or they try to sell you this security package or this SEO package or this other thing that they make a lot of margin on, but doesn't cost them a lot. So if that's who you want to throw in with, good luck. But you probably don't if you have a serious business. So that's where this guy named Josh Strebel came along, and he said, okay. Sorry, I kind of skipped ahead a little bit. And then if you didn't want shared hosting, then you kind of got a dedicated server, right? That was like the jump. At one point, it was you could have a tiny slice, or you could have the whole darn pie. And that was ridiculously expensive, $300 a month, whatever. So there were a lot of people were kind of trapped in between. There was colo, you could buy a box and stick it in a data center, things like that. But along came this guy named Josh Strebel, and he said, we could probably like set up hosting and tune it for WordPress, because WordPress had come on the scene, was super popular, and he pretty much invented the managed WordPress hosting idea. And that was called Pagely. Was it called? Yeah, I think it was called Pagely out the whole time. So and in the beginning, it was like baling wire and twine, right? It was like what everybody else was doing, but he kind of tweaked it for WordPress. And then other people started to see what he was doing, and they said, "Oh, that's cool." And WP Engine entered the market, and that's when things like really went up, because they were venture backed. They were gobbling up people like crazy. And WordPress hosting kind of changed forever. And they were the first ones to, $30 a month for WordPress hosting. People were losing their mind. Why would anyone pay that, right? Well, what you got a lot more than you got from that shared WordPress host. You got a CDN. Who doesn't know what a CDN is? So a CDN is a content delivery network. So like, let's say you have a web server and you have a bunch of images on that server and you want to get them to somebody in Norway. Do you want to send them across the Atlantic Ocean, or would it make more sense to send them from Amsterdam to that person in Norway? So what a CDN does is it takes your static content, your images, your CSS files, your video files, your audio, whatever, things that don't change, and it distributes them around the world to what are called points of presence, so that when that person connects to your website, they download them from the closest one, which means that while your browser is downloading all that media from there, it's downloading your website from your main server, and your browser can do 6 things at once. It can do 6 connections to each server. So you get 6 connections to the CDN and 6 connections to your server. So you've literally doubled the amount of stuff it can download at once. So a CDN pretty much doubles the speed of your website, sometimes more. They also added a thing called a static cache, which took the stuff in WordPress that took a long time and it snapshotted it. And then when somebody asks for your homepage, it's like, here's the last snapshot of that. It didn't have to go rebuild your homepage from scratch. It would just say, here's the last snapshot. So that made your site super fast and super duper fast. And suddenly you had sites that were like almost instant on clicks. A lot of stuff has come even in the interim since then. But that was what so for $25 more a month, but only one site, not unlimited anything, you got a wicked fast site. And so WP Engine kind of upped the game there. And then, so everybody's like, man, WP Engine's killing it. We should build something too. And so a bunch of other people came in the game. And so you kind of ended up, so this is Josh's diagram. He did the keynote at WordCamp Phoenix a couple months ago. And I really liked the way that he had kind of broken this down. So he's got consumer here. So below this is shared, because this is managed WordPress hosting options. So yeah, I mean, you can go Google this too. It's out there on the internet. That's where we got it. That internet thing, that series of tubes. So so like below consumer is like shared, because this is all managed. So GoDaddy got in the game and they said, well, hey, we've got like standard hosting, we've got business hosting. Not sure what isn't business hosting, but anyways. And then they have their managed hosting. And then Bluehost got in the game and they said, oh, we do it too. And Bluehost, it says EIG there. Anybody know who EIG is? EIG stands for Endurance International Group. And so they were a group of investors that said, hey, this web hosting thing is kind of big. Let's start buying up hosts and consolidating them. But let's keep the brands around so people didn't know we did that. And so you have Bluehost and Fat Cow and HostGator and HostMonster, and I mean, it's like 50 some companies at this point. And now they've expanded outside of WordPress hosting to, what's it called? I can't think of it. It was the competitor to Envato, the marketplace for WordPress stuff. And then they bought SiteLock, and so what they did was they said, hey, we're going to buy these marketplaces, and we're going to buy the security company, and we're going to resell it to all of our hosting customers, which is brilliant if you want to make a ton of money, but not brilliant if you want to give a great hosting experience, because they're all about extracting profit. So what people will literally do is say, Bluehost crashed, so I'm going to switch to HostGator. It's like HostGator's lines run through Bluehost data center. Like it all runs through Utah, which is Bluehost Central. Like literally when Bluehost Central went down, like 20 web hosts were down for 4 hours because all of their traffic ends up running through Bluehost at some point. So like you have to be careful that you don't end up in their clutches, because then you think you've escaped and you've actually just jumped into the, out of the frying pan into the fire. So Bluehost gets a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? They have been the recommended host on WordPress.org for many, many, many years. They give WordPress a lot of money to be in that spot. It's kind of a dirty secret. So people go, oh, WordPress recommends Bluehost. And I'm like, yeah, I guess technically they recommend them. That doesn't mean they're any good. And if you've got like your personal blog, Bluehost is great. If you're running your business, I wouldn't put it on Bluehost. I wouldn't put it on HostGator. We rescue a lot of clients from there, and they're shocked at how much faster their site runs without any changes on a decent host. And the reality is those servers are absolutely, they're getting every bit of performance they can out of them because their goal is profit. It's not quality. So you're like, okay, get me away from these guys. Where do I go? So you can go up a level. So Liquid Web is an interesting one. They were a host, and they kind of did the EIG thing, but they kind of bought up a bunch of people and consolidated them under their brand. They bought one of my favorite hosts, what was it? WiredTree. I loved WiredTree, and then Liquid Web bought them, and it's like, okay, goodbye WiredTree. SiteGround is another popular one. They're based in Romania. If you're going to go in this level, SiteGround's a pretty good one to go with. Kinsta's pretty decent. I'm not a huge fan of DreamHost. Flywheel's also excellent. They're based out of Iowa. And so these guys have kind of, staked out a niche. So Liquid Web is really big into WooCommerce hosting. They have a WooCommerce optimized hosting product. They have engineers building plugins to make WooCommerce better. So they're really kind of leaning into e-commerce. SiteGround is known as it's not super expensive and it's not super cheap, but it's pretty dang good. Kinsta's kind of performance focused. DreamHost has been around forever, but has the most unintuitive control panel I've ever used in my entire life. I'm sure there are people that know it like the back of their hand, but the few clients we've had come from DreamHost, they were like, hey, can you update my DNS? And I'm like, give me 45 minutes to figure out where the heck in this control panel I added the DNS. And then Flywheel caters to designers. They said, hey, designers, buy from us. We'll take away like all the sharp bits and give you a really decent hosting platform, and then we'll help you resell to your clients. So they're really kind of focused on designers reselling to clients. So if you are any of those people, that might be a good pick for you. You really can't go wrong on that prosumer tier. They're really trying to aim at a lot of people. They're value driven, generally pretty affordable. But if you're like, you know what, my business needs a little bit more than that. I'm not a designer. Maybe I have e-commerce, but I'm not a fan of cPanel, which Liquid Web uses. Or I don't want my hosting in Romania because I don't know what will happen. Then you move up to that mid-market. So this is where WP Engine is kind of the king, right? Everybody's like, oh, use WP Engine. Why? Well, because they're really good. Why? Well, because they're really good. Why? Because I see them everywhere. It's like, okay, well, they were an early entrant. They really shook up the market. They have some cool stuff. They were the innovators of the staging site, which was really cool when it came out, and then you realized it wasn't really a staging site. It was like 80% of a staging site, and it never really worked as intended. I started using it back when I was a freelancer, and it usually caused more problems than it really solved. Like, all right, we made all these changes on the staging site. How do we get it up to the live site? There was no tool for that, right? It was kind of like, good luck. So Pantheon's really great if you're a publisher, if you have like a blog or a food blog or a magazine site. They kind of went hard after that. They also have gone hard after agencies, specifically marketing agencies who want to build sites that they're not really web apps, they're marketing sites. So they've gone after the agencies and said, host all your sites on WP Engine, we'll give you really good rates, and then you go resell to your clients, right? In fact, they email me about every month saying, hey, do you want to come over? And no, we're good. We're big fans of Pantheon around here. That's because we're a dev shop. We build web applications. We build things that automate people's businesses. We build really complex websites here at Lemonfire. And when I found Pantheon at first, I think I was at the Prestige Conf here in Minneapolis, and I was like, these guys are crazy. Like, that's really crazy cool. But I was a freelancer at the time. Their prices seemed a little high, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'll give it a try. And then I kind of came around to it a couple years later when I had joined Lumenfire here, and I was like, this is exactly what we need right now. And so we signed on. We're a partner with Pantheon, and we're a reseller. And the reason we love Pantheon so much is they have solved that pesky, how do you use WordPress but use a real development workflow where you normally have a development server, a testing server, and a live server. Nobody else down here does that, right? They're all like, you're live, make your cowboy code away, good luck. Oh, you have a staging server, good luck. And there's just no workflow around any of this stuff. So a lot of people are literally cowboy coding their sites and hoping for the best, right? So Pantheon came out, they really came at it from a very different, they were a Drupal host. So they were very focused on developers. They said, let's get in the WordPress space. And they took kind of the Drupal DevOps workflow they'd built, and they brought it to the WordPress space. So what's really cool is you develop code on dev, you push it up. It's all Git. It's all version controlled, like it should be, right? And then you take content and you edit content on your live site, then you can copy it down into dev for testing or into test for testing, which is really how it should be. There's still some sticky wickets in there, like I need to update this plugin option, and I need that kit to go up, and there's ways to get around that. But it's really they've really kind of solved that issue of how the heck do I develop my site while users are using and entering content and interacting with my site, and how do I host it in such a way that if I get a spike in traffic, my site's not going to go down? Because the challenge with these lower tier people is if you get too much traffic to your site, one of two things is going to happen. Your site's going to go down, generally, and then you're going to get a call or an email, you need to upgrade to a VPS for $80 a month. Because they're counting on you not using a lot of traffic to stay at that cheap level. And almost always, you're told, move to a VPS. These people have no business running a VPS. They don't know what to do with a VPS, and that's the only up. A lot of times I think they're now telling people go to managed. Even those have caps. One of the nice things about Pantheon, at least, is it auto scales. They'll take that traffic spike, and unless it's a sustained amount of traffic, they're not going to tell you to upgrade. They're like, hey, there was a spike. We handled it. Don't worry. Carry on. If you're consistently, taxing your box, then they'll tell you, hey, maybe it's time to upgrade because your box is, your site is under sustained load. You need more power. But so far, they've never actually told us that on any of our websites. And we've run far more visits than they claim. That level, they're like 20,000. We've run more than 20,000. Haven't even noticed. So that's that mid-market tier. And then you see that tier up there, it's called Pagely. So Josh successfully went from consumer all the way up to enterprise. And I think their cheapest plan is $300 a month, and it goes up to $15,000 a month and more, because they host like the Walt Disney Company family of websites. So smart like a fox, that guy. He realized the real money in hosting, if you didn't want to become massive like WP Engine was, find the big boys and girls and have fewer customers that pay you more. Because of course, you look at this, there's a reason it's big at the bottom. You need a lot of people paying you $5 or 25 or 10 or $30 a month to pay for that fancy headquarters and all the travel and all the salespeople and all that, right? As you go up, you can sell, fewer customers, same revenue or better revenue. So that's why, Pagely's that tiny little thing. They're a tiny ragtag crew, but they do amazing hosting. But it's not for most people. You're going to let me go here? All right. So this is our version. Pretty much the same thing. One thing, of course, is that everybody kind of bleeds between layers, right? like Liquid Web probably has a mid-market level. WP Engine has a prosumer level. So like there's kind of everybody bleeds a little bit. So then a lot of people say, well, okay, I'm gonna run my own server on DigitalOcean, right? I got a $25 credit, and they and I did that once back before I knew more than or as much as I do today. And I thought I'm going to use this DigitalOcean thing. This looks really cool. And they have a one-click WordPress deployment. That server got so saturated with spam within a week that I had to move them to a different web host because you have to set up firewalls and blacklisting and all this other stuff to keep the bad guys out that all these people do automatically, right? Because they don't want their boxes taxed, so they're keeping the bad guys out. DigitalOcean, you're literally like, it's like renting a storage unit, right? Except there's no security. You know? There's not even and if you're not careful, there's no lock on the door, right? Because you might just, leave your ports open or whatever. And they're not even going to tell you, hey, you left the door open. They're just going to be like, yeah, sorry, you left the door open and your box got hacked, right? Because they're, for the cost of what they're giving you far more power for the $5 a month. But, with great power comes great responsibility. AWS is in the same boat. You can rent a server from them. They have something called Light Sail that kind of configures a bunch of stuff for you. But it's one of those, like, if you don't know what you're doing, you can get in trouble really fast. You can get hacked really fast. Hacked in such a way that you cannot get unhacked. Hacked in such a way that you are hacking other boxes on the internet because your machine is completely taken over and now infecting other machines. So if you don't know what you're doing, these are kind of dangerous. I'd stay away from them. You're far better off letting the geeks do what the geeks do and paying a little bit of money every month than attempting to save a couple bucks and watching your website go down in flames. There's this other one up here called WordPress VIP. That's kind of a weird one. Who knows the difference between WordPress.com and WordPress.org? Anybody want to share what their idea is? WordPress.com is a hosted version of the open source software available at WordPress.org, but it's a very Frankenstein version. It's the largest multi-site install in the entire world. It runs on a massive cluster of servers and sharded databases, and like the things that they have done to scale WordPress to that level is kind of mind-boggling. But they did it. And a lot of that has come back into the WordPress software, which has been really good. So at some point, people started going to the WordPress folks saying, nobody can host us. We're too big. This was before like Pagely and some of these others came out. And so WordPress said, oh, okay, we can help you. So we'll put you on one of these multi-sites on our mega network and charge you a lot of money per month and put you in this insanely rigid workflow where every commit is code reviewed by a developer at Automatic. And they will not accept it if there is one code sniffer violation in your code anywhere. This site needs, this patch needs to go in right now. The client is screaming at me, you have a space after your semicolons. Go fix them. Are you serious? Yes. Because you're deploying code into this massive shared environment, they can't let any bad code in. So WordPress.vip is a very interesting beast. And from my understanding, a lot of publishers are rapidly going to Pagely and Pantheon and WP Engine higher tiers. WP Engine took a lot of business from WordPress VIP because it wasn't a great fit for a lot of people, but it was like the only option at the time. So they ended up on VIP. They're going, man, we're paying a lot of money for this hassle. It's like the hosting is great, but it's really limited. And so, when these other ones came out and started offering higher tiers, they're like, let's go. Let's get out of here. So that's really not right for most people. Some people are still on it. Some people love it. They've adapted to it, but man, the VIP sites I've worked on were not great experiences. I'd be on any of these other guys any day. So that's kind of the whole pie, right? Most of you are probably going, hey, you could have stopped at prosumer. But, you know, it's good to know what's out there. So that's kind of the hosting pie then. So the question is, what's best for your website? I can't tell you that without knowing more about your website. But I would say, honestly, the most expensive hosting that you can afford is probably what's best for your website. Now, don't go broke. Don't go out and pay Pagely $15,000 a month. But kind of say, like, this is about what I'd be comfortable spending, and then maybe say, well, okay, I can spend a couple bucks more, and find somebody that offers at that level, because hosting is pretty commodified. You know, like it's pretty much like $5, $30 and over, you know, and you know, find the one that works for you. There's guidance around number of visits, things like that. But yeah, it's one of those things where, you know, you don't have to put premium gas in your car. It doesn't really run better. There's diminishing returns, obviously. But if you're paying less than $30 a month, you might want to reevaluate what you're paying for hosting, because it's really a minimal investment. It was interesting. I was talking to my chiropractor the other day, and I said, what was I saying? I was talking about a product that's $100 a month. That's like critical to some of our customers' businesses. We've got some customers who want it, but they don't want to pay the $100 a month. And I know you're going, aren't you? You're in business, right? Like nothing in your business costs you $100 a month. Nothing. And my chiropractor goes, I spend more than that on copy paper every month. Like I would pay that on a heartbeat if it automated my business. And I was like, I know. So it's funny how like people will get super cheap on things that are really critical business components. And it's like, what's your plan? Well, thoughts and prayers, I guess. Like, I hope they don't go down. I hope my site doesn't get irretrievably hacked. I hope they're running backups. There's a lot of hope in that equation, right? Versus, I know they're running backups. I know they're secure. I know they're not going down. And I know that if I get a traffic spike, they're going to stay up, right? Like, I sleep better at night knowing all of my client sites are in those categories. And I don't work on weekends because our sites don't generally go down on weekends because we invest in the right hosting. So that's my spiel on hosting. Any questions?
Is it when you move your site from one host to another site, does that ruin your former customers' bookmarks and things like that?
Only if you change your domain. If you don't, they don't even know. Like when's the last time you're on a site and you're like, oh, they're on WP Engine? You don't know, right? All you see is the domain. So yeah, as long as you don't change the domain, nothing changes to the outside world. There are ways to change your domain and not break those. And you don't lose any SEO. Like Google doesn't know. In fact, if you move to a better host, your SEO will improve because Google uses page speed as a ranking. And the higher up on that pyramid you go, the better configured those servers are to have caching and gzip enabled and things like that consumer level. They're not even going to turn on. And I'm like, why don't you have gzip on? It reduces your bandwidth bill. Like that boggles my mind. Like, why wouldn't you do something that makes? Because it's, you know, I don't know. I guess it's too much of a hassle to change one config line. I don't know. So it's weird how it's like, why wouldn't you do this thing that benefits you? I think it might be because it taxes the processors, but.
And then a follow-up is moving a website from one host to another a 2-day process or a week? Or?
It depends. It depends on the host you're moving to, and it depends on the site. We've had some that took 15 minutes, and I had one that took 3 days and 2 overnights. That was moving from WordPress. Yeah, a lot of them offer free migrations. I put free migrations in air quotes because often they're like, if it's easy, we'll move it for free. You know, if we run into any issues, then we'll refer you to this other company, and then or a lot of them contract with this other place that, you know, it's offshore labor moving your website. Good luck. So WP Engine and Pantheon, I know, have automated migrations that work most of the time. I think both of them use Blog Vault. So the Blog Vault is a backup tool and migrator tool, and they got smart and went to the hosts and said, hey, do you want an automated migration tool that's branded to you? So there's the Pantheon migrator, and there's the WP Engine migrator, and it's the same code under the hood. But they work pretty dang well because it sends it all through a third-party server, so that you don't run into timeouts and resource limitations on the cheap shared hosts. So it basically, it's like sending it out to Blog Vault, and then Pantheon sucks it in from Blog Vault. So, or WP Engine or whatever. So. I prosumer and above, I'd be shocked if they weren't supporting HTTP2 these days. So, I mean, you kind of have to misconfigure Nginx or Apache to not get HTTP2 these days. But what you get, like on the GoDaddy side, is you get people that have been on GoDaddy for 5 years. GoDaddy will never upgrade you off your old server until they have to. They will leave you on the crappiest, most junky old hardware until you make a stink. And then, we can move you to the new hardware. And it's like, well, why didn't you do that before? Because we were making a lot of money on you on the old hardware. So yeah, I mean, pretty much above that consumer, like at the prosumer level, it's all virtualized. So it's not actually running on any hardware. It's not the old model, it's all virtual machines. And so you're on a node full of virtual machines, and they spin up the virtual machines as needed. You get more processor because not everything's running at once, things like that. So, and you get more isolation in that it's a private chunk of the server versus this giant bazaar with your little booth. So, anybody else? Over there? Was that a question? No. Uh, oh yeah, I mean, doesn't sound too bad when you're like, man, I don't. Yep, yep.
So what are your thoughts on scalability? You know, with a scenario where you're cash strapped at this point in your business, but
Mm-hmm.
you want to get yourself placed on a path that could scale to.
I mean,
I just looked at Pantheon. I can't afford that.
yeah.
I see WP Engine chosen as single site for $35.
Mm-hmm.
That's in the range. Any other?
Well, you can get a single site on Pantheon for $35 if you work with an agency partner. We get preferred pricing. But yeah, I mean, if you're looking at 35, I wouldn't go past WP Engine Pantheon. Phenomenal hosts. If you're looking to save a little bit, that prosumer level, none of those hosts are bad. I mean, don't hear me say that. None of them are bad. Flywheel's awesome. SiteGround is good. They've got some weird stuff, but overall good. Liquid Web is solid. So I don't like them because I'm a developer. I'm very, very picky about my tools. But millions of websites run on those platforms, really solid every day. They would all scale to a certain degree, yes. Yeah. I mean, they're all. None of them are running bad hardware or old hardware. They're all very recent companies. They're all going to work with you if you hit scaling issues. But honestly, most people are not going to hit scaling issues that would tax those servers, because in that model, you're still on a shared server, but it's virtual private servers, and you get the things have improved quite a bit since the shared days as far as the way that they can balance the load within that server. So what you get with with WP Engine and Pantheon is those are much more scalable. Pantheon for certain. What was I going to say there? I know that WP Engine has some hard caps. Pantheon has no caps. Like, they will take whatever traffic you throw at them, and then they will talk to you and figure out what to do. So that is one nice thing about Pantheon, is they will never shut your site down unless you don't pay your bill. So I know WP Engine does have some hard caps, and they start to charge you for overages, because I had a site that went over. I wish I knew Pantheon existed when I had that site. So Pantheon did just up their prices, though, which I think they're definitely moving up market, which is good. They offer a heck of a lot for what you get, though. So, but yeah, so if mid-market feels too expensive, you really can't go wrong with prosumer. If I had to pick one in prosumer, I'd probably pick Flywheel or Kinsta. The times I've used Flywheel for clients, it's been a really nice experience. Really nice people. Kinsta I don't have a ton of experience with. SiteGround, I just was in a group the other day, and they said, why are these strange files appearing in my web root? And they're like, oh, those are Linux core dumps. And I'm like, those should not be dumping into your web root. So there was like something weird. They acted like it was normal, and I'm like, I've been hosting websites for 20 years. I have never seen a operating system core dump in my website. I don't understand why you would put that on the user. So, and then Liquid Web, I'm just not a fan of cPanel, and they use cPanel. So. Yeah, I mean, honestly, they're a great host. You know, it's like, I just wonder, like, okay, what else is under the hood there? We did have one client on SiteGround that was having some scalability issues on SiteGround in their caching plugin, and we moved them to our platform, and they have not had a single issue since. So. I avoid cPanel like the plague these days. It is such a hog. Yeah, I mean, it was so popular for so long, and really, it's like I don't see the need for it anymore, because cPanel came from the days when your web server did everything. It hosted your website, it did your email, it hosted your DNS, and it's like nobody does it like that anymore. It's like no. One server hosts your website. Get some service with like globally distributed anycast DNS to host your DNS, like Cloudflare, or GoDaddy. If you bought your, GoDaddy's domain DNS services are not bad, or Hover, or Amazon. I mean, there's a million places that'll host your DNS for almost nothing, and they're far better than your single server out there. Your email should not be on your web server. It should be at G Suite or Office 365 or Rackspace or whatever. Like, do not tax your web server with exchanging email. It should be serving your website, right? And the reason they did that was because it was expensive, so everybody tried to shove everything into the one machine. There was, wasn't that long ago. It was probably about 4 years ago. We were still using cPanel, and it was like our servers just kept getting slower and slower, and there was nothing we could do, and then we were trying to upgrade PHP, and it's like, okay, to upgrade PHP, your server is going to go down for an hour while we recompile PHP on the server. And I'm like, what? Explain that to me. Why can't I just choose which one I want to run? And now with the modern stacks, it's all componentized. And so you can choose whatever. Like, we have servers that run 4 different versions of PHP if need to, and it's running workers for each pool or whatever. So like, there's a whole new generation of server management tools that are so much superior to cPanel and so much lighter weight because they're agentless. So they don't actually do it. All they do is kind of like pop into the server every once in a while and configure things, and then they're gone. cPanel is running on your server 24/7, 365 tune-up resources. So yeah, if they use cPanel, I'm usually a hard pass. For some people it makes sense, but I just have not. I've so moved on to better options out there. that are in a lot of ways even simpler than cPanel, because cPanel had a million dials and knobs and things you could check, and if you checked the wrong thing, it was bad news. And it was kind of like, hey, you can check this if you want. And you're like, why would I check that? Well, you'd almost never check that, but we left it there because somebody needed it. And it's like, that's a really bad way to run a web hosting company. So a lot of the cPanel hosts kind of like rescan and hide a bunch of stuff from cPanel. So I do use one cPanel-based host, but they've kind of stripped their cPanel down, and I only use them for my clients who really don't want to pay a lot of money. So.
I hadn't seen it in quite a while. I had a client using SiteGround. It surprised me. I had to kind of relearn where everything was. It's gotten big.
It's gotten really big, yeah.
There's a lot going on in there.
You can do all the things with cPanel, and it's like, but 90% of people never need to do any of those. Yeah, yep. And so many of them are so much better done by other things that are often free or included in whatever you've already paid. So, yeah. Anybody else? I haven't really used them. I've heard people rave about them. I mean, I know that they're very fast and very performant, but I just haven't had a reason to go anywhere else. So I haven't heard anything bad about Kinsta. Yeah. It's 8:28. Anybody got any general WordPress questions they want to ask?